we go through so many seasons where our titles change, our roles change, the things we're doing in life change, but who we truly are never changes. And I believe it's the thing that we constantly need to be reminded of. It's something we don't outgrow. We constantly need to be reminded who God is and who we are to him.
Who am I? These three simple words hold a lot of power. But for people everywhere, the answer isn't quite so simple. Well, we have with us worship artist, a ministry founder, author of Daughter Become Who You Already Are. Laney Rene is with us. Thank you for joining the show and the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
This is going to be fun. I can already tell.
Hey, we found out some exciting stuff about you. You were a backup dancer?
I was. It's my claim to fame right there.
That's cool.
I love it.
That's fun. Wow.
Tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I loved to perform growing up, but was never really I didn't have technical training or anything like that. I just loved to dance. I loved to perform, loved to sing. I got involved in a Christian performing arts thing when I was a kid, and we would go around to nursing homes and schools and just share the love of Jesus with people through that. And I fell in love with dance through just seeing that it could have such a deep purpose. And I still didn't have the studio training that a lot of kids had, even in the area I grew up in. And when I was 18 years old, I went to a Britt Nicole concert. If you're not familiar with Britt, she's a Christian artist, pop artist. And I went to one of her shows and I just saw what she was doing. I saw her heart for people, her ministry through her songs, and just the way she really stopped for the one and got to know people, and that her show was just so much more than just a pop show. She was so about people. And I remember seeing that and just saying to God, just in my heart, I would love to do something like that. I want to be a part of something like that. Long story short, she started to do a Twitter audition for her tour one time.
Oh.
And she had dancers send in videos, and I was dating a guy at the time who was a dancer, and he auditioned.
Oh.
And he got the job. I didn't even audition because I thought, there's no way, I'm not good enough. I'm not even going to try. And he toured with her for a little while. And during that, I was like, you know what? I'm going to get ready. I'm going to prepare. I'm going to just go ahead and learn all the choreography. And so I started learning her choreo from YouTube videos and learned her whole show. And she had another dancer that couldn't make it to a show one time. And guess who knew the choreo?
You did.
Guess who was ready? I did. And so she knew I danced. She had never really seen me dance, but she asked me to come in, step in for a show. And it turned out that the other dancer had to be out for a while. And so that was basically my audition, and I stayed with her for 4 years.
Oh, wow.
Backup dance for her. Later on, I went on tour with Mandisa.
Oh, cool.
Which was just such a awesome experience. I love her. And
wow.
Yeah, it was a really cool thing that God definitely used in my life and had a funny way of leading me to a lot of what I'm doing now. So it's pretty cool.
Both of those are amazing women.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm also
people.
really impressed that you can dance, because I remember my 9th grade year trying a solid calendar year to learn a very small portion of a New Kids dance. And my best friend was in drill team, and she was like, just stop. It's not going to happen for you.
It's not working. This is not your calling.
It's not in the cards
Nope.
for you.
No dancing.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
So becoming who you already are. That's kind of a fun play on words. It's like, whoa, wait a second. So tell us about yourself. How did this book come about?
I feel like it's in so many ways, it's my story. It's all of our story, I think, as women. We go through many different seasons in our lives. As I've gotten older, I've realized this, but we go through so many seasons where our titles change, our roles change, the things we're doing in life change, but who we truly are never changes. And I believe it's the thing that we constantly need to be reminded of. It's something we don't outgrow. We constantly need to be reminded who God is and who we are to him. And I can look back at when I was 5 years old and already see just how the enemy was already after my identity and how I saw myself. And even though I couldn't recognize that it was lies, I can remember the lies even now, and even as a middle schooler, teenage years, getting into just eating disorder things and just having a so messed up view of myself, yet growing up in a Christian home, knowing what was true. And yet there was just kind of a disconnect between my mind and my heart, and I didn't realize it. And then I got into a not good relationship, just didn't have peace, stayed in that relationship for about 4 years. Through that, just kind of lost, again, just my side of who I truly was very insecure. And it just, who we are is the thing that has set me free every single time, and who God is to me, and that he's my father, and that I am truly his daughter. And my husband and I actually walked through a miscarriage a little over a year and a half ago with our little boy. I was 17 weeks along, and it was very just shocking, heartbreaking, hardest thing I'd ever walked through. And through that, a lot of women just came and would share their stories with me of what they had walked through, because I had shared publicly that basically we were pregnant, and now I had to go back and share that we weren't pregnant anymore. And so
Wow, it's tough.
that was really, really, really hard. But of course, it opened the door for them to share their stories. And, there was so much good intent in sharing stories and connecting. But I was also heartbroken by just how many women just said it doesn't get better. You'll always live, with a broken heart. And when I heard that, I just felt like, even from seasons I had already walked through and learned that I don't have to live broken. We don't have to live in that broken state for the rest of our lives. And I just felt a rise within me, honestly, of just the Holy Spirit, just a big no, like we don't have to live like that. Yes, it's heartbreaking. Yes, it's broken, but we still have hope. And I remember reading 2 Corinthians 4:8 in that season, and I just really felt like it gave me words for what I was going through. And it just says, we are hard pressed, but we are not crushed. We are perplexed, but we are not in despair. And when I read we are perplexed, but not in despair, I just felt like I was just kind of had this moment with God of like, that's how I feel. I feel perplexed, but I also know that you've shown me over and over again that with you, I'm not in despair. I'm never without hope. And so it was kind of the final straw for me of just feeling like this is a story. This is the testimony that needs to be told and needs to be shared with women of all seasons of life, that we do have a father, a loving father, who no matter what we've walked through, no matter what brokenness we've walked through in life, that he truly can make us whole and redeem it. And there's always redemption. If it's not good yet, he truly, there's more, because he's good and he's faithful. And so that's really what this book is about, of just over and over again, just seeing, who he is as a father, a faithful father, a redeeming father, a healing father, and again, just seeing who we are as his daughter.
I don't know why, for the first time, guys, it's hit me with that verse. You're perplexed, but you don't despair. I think God is telling us there are things in life you don't get. And maybe you never will.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know. For the first time, it's like God saying, you're not going to understand everything. And maybe that's okay. Because that's part of life. You try to figure that miscarriage out. You got to, I've got a daughter diagnosed with multiple special needs. I try to figure that out, and I can't.
Yeah.
But that comforts me somehow just now, knowing that I'm probably never going to figure it out, and maybe that's all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's good.
Something I think about is, I call it the 3 S's. Where am I going to find my security, my significance, and my strength? And so reading your story and thinking about our true identity, it becomes, well, really so crucial, but especially never more than right now in today's culture. I mean, I think through the years, we've probably all been very subjected to each other and the things that are said, but now it's also very public. Talk to me about how finding our true identity really relates into those things of feeling, where am I gathering my feelings of security and significance?
Can you ask me that question again? Sorry.
It's just the challenges that are especially prevalent right now in finding our true
Yeah.
identity in the face of maybe especially social media.
Yes. Man, I think I'm somebody who believes social media is a gift, honestly, in so many ways, but I think it has just brought a lot of challenges that, even as I look at girls who are 10 years old and they've got social media, they're definitely facing a level of challenges that I didn't face. I didn't have Instagram until I was 18. And even then, it wasn't in my face all day long, but kids are growing up in a different world. And I think about that with my daughter now. I'm like, the stuff that she's going to see and hear about that I never imagined, my daughter would grow up in, and I just think that in itself even more is a reason why we need to know the truth about who we are. We need to know, like, from a young age. Even I go to, maybe I'll keep her from from social media. Maybe she won't have it for a long time. But I also, like, when you know the truth, it's a gift. When you know who you are, I think it's a great way to share about Jesus and his love. And that's what I do, now. It's a great way a great tool. But it definitely has caused incredible challenges, I think.
It's like everything, it kind of comes down to balance, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
all these external influences, maybe they're not so different than what we've always gone through, except of it being so public. But yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
for sure.
Good.
So many of us grow up in church. We've lived our whole lives, or a good portion of our lives, believing in Jesus. And we hear the term daughter in the context of God as our good father. That's something we grow up hearing and believing. But let's talk about what this means, in the context of, the grace, the inheritance even that we have through Jesus as daughters.
Yeah. I mean, I shared this already, but I grew up in a Christian home, and I didn't feel like that became real to me until I was like early 20s. And that came from going through broken seasons, when my heart was broken. And I just really began to discover, like, even just verses that I had known my entire life, reading them again and going, oh, kind of like you said, oh, that's never hit before, but suddenly that just hit me. Oh, there's actually so much life in this. And I think when you grow up in a Christian home, it's easy to know a lot, and feel like you know a lot. But I think often we don't know as much as we think we know. And that was me. I think I thought I knew a lot about God, thought my own righteousness was pretty good, thought I was pretty good on my own. And then just got a reality check of, it actually has nothing to do with you. It actually is all my grace. It's always been my goodness. It's always been my faithfulness. And that, I remember I had I was having a conversation with my mom one day, and my mom is somebody that I go to for advice and wisdom even now a lot. Her and I are so close. But I was a teenager, and I remember I just couldn't get out of my mind something that I had heard that my friend did. And I was so just like caught up on their sin, honestly. And in that, I was like, it was so self-righteous, honestly, like, and I didn't even realize I was doing that. But my mom looked at me and she was like, you know that, you need the blood just as much as they do, and your righteousness is no greater than theirs. And that was a life-changing moment for me, because it was like, oh, like all my life I thought I've been pretty good. All my life I've been in church. All my life I've looked at, other people and thought, they were not even realizing it, but I was better, than them. And it's so easy to do when we start comparing, even, and it doesn't matter what season you're in. I think you can start comparing and think, oh, I'm better off than them. But when you put yourself next to the law, when you put yourself next to God's just grace, it's like we all need God's grace. None of us stand a chance next to the law. And so, man, that revelation has just really impacted my faith journey in the last probably 10 years of just realizing, like, it really is all about his grace, and it actually has nothing to do with our performance.
That's good. On the flip side of hearing that God is our Father, if we've grown up in the church, so many of us experience things where we have a really hard time relating to him in that way. My parents got divorced when I was a baby. My dad walked off. So I didn't grow up with my father in my life. And even though I grew up hearing that God was my father, I walked away from him for 14 years. And it wasn't until I returned in my 30s that I really started to understand him as my father. So maybe for somebody who's still struggling to get to that place, they're like, man, just what I've gone through, I have a really hard time looking at God that way. What would you say?
Yeah. First, I would just say I'm so sorry. Like I can't, because that's not my story. Obviously, like I grew up. I read about this in the book, but I grew up with an incredible dad. But I still needed my father. I still needed my heavenly Father. And I think about one of my really good friends in my life. Her and I have had just completely different stories. Her dad was bipolar, addicted to drugs, alcohol, left her and her brothers when they were young, ran off, and left her and her mom and her brothers with, just kind of stranded them, and even came at them at one point and tried to end their life. And when I look at her and just what God has done in her life, I always tell her, like, you literally, like, you walked through fire, but you were not touched. And you would just never know what she has actually been through. And every time I'm with her, she'll tell me something else that she's walked through. And I'm just like, how are you who you are? But it's such a testimony, I believe, and she does too, of just, she has known the Father's love for her. And even though she didn't have the dad in her life that she would have hoped for, that really did show her, the love of God, God has not failed her, and he has redeemed her view of what a father is meant to be. And like I said, our stories are different, but I do believe it's such a picture of how deeply, no matter what your story is, how kind of all of our stories are the same. They all, when we know Jesus and we know his love, he really can redeem and make any relationship whole, no matter what it might have looked like.
Yeah. I remember hearing kids with their dads when I was growing up, and the pet names they had, for their daughters. And I grew up with my grandpa as my father figure, and he was wonderful. Like, we lived with him, my grandparents, my whole life. But I have noticed since, I returned to my walk with Christ, and just when he is like speaking into my soul, he uses the words that I wanted to hear from my dad. Like, he'll be, like, honey, sweetheart, my sweet girl. And I'm so grateful because I really feel like he works overtime to reinforce who he is. And I'm so thankful for the care and the love that he takes with me in that way.
That's beautiful. Yeah. It reminds me, my mom and I were actually talking about the other day. It's cool how both of us just said, like, when we talk to him, we feel like we hear him say our name. Like when he starts to talk, and that's such a, like you're saying, just that endearing, loving voice of a father. And I don't even know, like, I would love, what do you feel like, kind of asking you a question now, but what do you feel like made you hear that? Like, what was there a moment in your life that you remember hearing that for the first time?
I think I struggle with clinical depression, like some pretty bad mental health issues. And it's, strangely enough, well, I guess a lot of people go through this, but I can hear him sometimes in my darkest moments. And I think one of the most recent things, and we talked about this on the show, is the enemy tries to take me back to who I was before I agreed to be treated by medication. I was as difficult as I am now, I was even more difficult then. And I treated people very poorly because I was sick and I wasn't being treated. And so, Satan loves to say, you're not worth it. And, you like, look at everything that you've put people through. And I remember just like lamenting about that recently. And I literally, I was like, how do you even love me? Like how, and not that I think that I'm his favorite, but the words that he chose to speak to me in that moment, he said, don't you know that you shine brighter than anyone else in this world, my sweet girl?
Wow.
And and I think the first time that I really heard him call me a pet name was when he enabled me to forgive my dad. He was like, honey, let it go. And so, which I guess is actually really significant, forgiving my birth father.
Wow,
And then
Misty.
I just realized that, like, actually
huge.
understanding who he was. Yeah. So, man,
That's
wow. Thank you for the therapy.
That's awesome.
Putting two and two together here.
Do you know, though, there have been so many moments in my life where I haven't been face to face with a person, but I felt like God has put that person's like face in my mind and had me say things to them in a way. Like, I forgive you, even though you may not get that chance actually face to face, but I've had moments that have been so freeing for me and like truly feel like I let go finally of something that has happened to me or something, a relationship or whatever, and just okay, I forgive you and I release you and I bless you. And just what that does, I think, in your heart is just amazing. So freeing.
Wow, that's awesome. That's a pretty good moment there.
Yeah, right? We can wrap it up now. Just kidding.
Exactly.
Hey, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, that was good.
I turned that around, but
Yeah.
I hope that's okay.
That's totally
No,
fine.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Laney, you mentioned the miscarriage, and my wife has been through that. It's interesting. Our first daughter, like I said earlier, diagnosed with multiple special needs. She's got cerebral palsy. She's in a wheelchair. She's nonverbal. And it took a little courage to have children again. And then when we tried, that's what happened. And it was hard. It was hard when that happened. And then, about a couple of years later, our son was born. That sort of redeemed it a little bit. But have you found healing through that or no?
Yes, I would say I still call. I don't want to in any way say this and it sound like I'm comparing what we walk through, even through what you're walking through, but just from my own experience, I'll say we lost our little boy, or call it a loss, but I really feel like what God has done, it doesn't feel like a loss anymore. Meaning it was, of course, my heart broke. Of course, I long for him and miss him. But what was death on this earth, God has brought life out of, and really brought a hope of heaven and a reality of heaven to my family. And I say all the time, like, I get to enjoy, I have a 3-year-old little girl, and I get to know her personality every day. You know, we get to spend time together, and I love spending time with her. But I also feel like, even though it's not in the same way, I get to enjoy my little boy because of what God has done through just getting to carry him for those 17 weeks and how he really has changed my life. Whenever I was just kind of going through that and asking for God to just show me who he was, because walking through that, I remember just kind of going like, I can't explain this. Like you said earlier, this is something in my journey with him that I can't explain. I don't understand why this happened. And I remember thinking of Jeremiah 29:11, another verse I had known my entire life. For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future.
I love that verse.
I remember thinking like, I love that verse.
Yeah.
But honestly, in all honesty, I remember thinking, okay, God, but if you're good, why did I go through this? If your plans for me really are to prosper me and not to harm me, why am I walking through this kind of heartache?
Yeah, because it doesn't seem real prosperous, does it?
Yeah.
It doesn't.
No.
You know? But one of my favorite things to do when I'm just kind of really studying the word is to go back and look at the original, like Hebrew or Greek that it was translated from. And I remember going back and just reading the Hebrew translation of this verse and just being mind blown, honestly. Just a verse that I had known my entire life had so much more meaning than I had ever known. And there's so much to it, but the very end specifically is what really spoke to me in that situation. And I remember it talks about to give you hope and a future. And when I read that word that we've translated into future, it originally also had a meaning for past. And I just felt like God was saying to me in that moment, Laney, I am the one who can step in to the things that have already happened in your life, the broken things, the things that feel final. And I am the one who can fill them with hope and a future. And even though it feels like the death of your son is final, I've got life and hope to bring from this. And I kind of just sat there and wept, honestly, because my heart had just felt so, I just really been crying out for hope. I felt like I was in despair. And from then, I just felt like there was just a lift, a rise in my heart and in my spirit and in my mind. Okay, God, I'm going to believe that even though this looks final, even though this hurts like nothing I've ever walked through before, I believe that somehow you're going to make this good. Somehow, it's just not, you're not done yet. I'm not seeing the full picture in this. And a little over a year and a half out from that, I can say that he's brought, it doesn't fully make sense to my mind. Even as I tell people, I almost feel a little crazy, but he really has filled my heart and my spirit with so much hope and so much life, and just getting to talk about my little boy. Like, I still talk about him all the time, and the enemy would have loved for me to stop talking about him or talk about him in a way of, death and being without hope. But God is so much greater. And I have seen that over and over again, that he really can redeem and heal any broken thing that we've walked through.
Love that. Just that, but God.
Amen.
Yeah. I think we can all say that. I think about my early days in the Lord and starting out in the college dormitory where some very brave friend invited this girl to church. Thank you, Lori, for that. But then I found out that really what she had done was drug in a trophy heathen off of the sidewalks of Arizona State University. And I found that out the hard way by dating the popular guy in the group, which was a no-no. And just the backs that were turned on me, just the words that were turned on me. I learned early on that I had to establish where my feelings of identity were going to come from, because, wow, was that a turnaround from, oh, we want you to come to church and, you know, we want you to know the peace that we know. And then the backstabbing that went on. And I've come so far as to say, thank you, Lord, because immediately I had to make up my mind. Was I here because of the joy that I initially felt, or was I here, you know, for the accolades that I had expected and not only didn't receive, but quite the opposite. So pouring myself through your book, Laney, I was just in tears, page after page, going, wow, this is so healing, is to accept the gift of our identity as Jesus sees us, as going to the cross and saying, you're worth it. No matter where you've been, today is a new day in me. And I'm just so grateful. So as we're talking about stepping into that role as God's chosen treasure, sounds perfectly wonderful, but sometimes can feel unattainable, don't you think? Yeah. So how have you faced similar situations in what we call the real world?
Man, I think just going to his word has helped me over and over again, you know, just in that season where I talked about, you know, his grace becoming really real. I kind of read the same verses over and over again, ones I had known my whole life, but just went, okay, but what does this really mean? And I love the scripture that talks about like not being conformed to the patterns of this world, but being transformed by the renewal of your mind. And looking back, that really is what happened. Like I let God renew my mind, and he renewed my mind with his word. And I would stand in the middle of my kitchen at my apartment. You know, I had 3 roommates, and I remembered at times they would all leave and I'd be like, oh, thank goodness. Okay. And I would, like, this sounds kind of silly, but I would grab my Bible and I would just read a whole passage just out loud. It was almost like I needed to hear it. I didn't just need to read it, but I needed to hear it out of my mouth to just let that renewing, you know, really happen. And I would say that's something I've kept doing to this day. You know, when I do feel those moments of accusation and you don't deserve this and you're not qualified and you're not chosen, I go find the verses that I know tell me that is not true. And you know, something I do feel like is different now. When I was a kid, I would read my Bible and look for myself. I would look for, okay, how am I strong? You know, how am I confident? And as I began to just learn God's heart more, I started to look for Jesus in the Word and look for what he had done for me. And that's when I realized that's where the real power was. You know, that was when I started to actually become free and live a full, confident life, because I can look at myself all day long and not find confidence within myself. Anytime I try and do that, I just find more reasons to feel like I'm not worthy of anything, because in my own, I'm not. But when I look at Jesus and when I look at what he's done, there is a incredible supernatural confidence because it's not of myself. And specifically, I remember in those moments just reading Proverbs 14:26, and it just talks about, in the fear of the Lord is strong confidence, and his children will have a place of refuge. And I read that verse and I was like, ooh, confidence, that's what I need, like that's what got my attention. But really, like, what happened was I was so broken. I was in such a desperate season in my life that I found God as my refuge. And when I, really discovered him as a refuge, that's when naturally, the overflow was he became my confidence. And I didn't even realize it. It just was a natural thing.
Amen.
Yeah.
Love that.
We've tackled it, several times, just like the past hurts and insecurities. I think everybody here has brought that stuff up. We were actually just talking about this on the show, specifically how there is a person that comes to mind. Like, I can remember, and it's not just this one person, it's just the most recent instance. I remember the date a year and a half ago that something was said to me. And I just realized yesterday, like, I remember the day it happened, like the day on the calendar, which is crazy. So clearly I have a little bit of trouble in this area, letting go, moving past when people hurt
Hey, we all
me.
do.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
all do.
oh my word, it's the worst. It's the worst. How do we, like, what, maybe some practical steps towards, and I know it's not going to be an easy process.
Yeah.
It's not as easy as a list, but like maybe some starter steps towards moving go of this negative stuff and just embracing that new beginning that God offers us.
Yeah. Well, I kind of just, shared that it was his word for me. Like, it really was. I don't just say that because it sounds nice or it sounds like the right thing to say. I say that because his word and the truth in his word really is what changed my mind and like set me free from those patterns, those places, those dark places I would get in, the cycles of shame. And I think some just practical steps that I even remember taking and still take today to remember who I am is cutting out some of the noise. And that can be social media, that can be just like my phone in general, putting away my phone for a while. I remember listening to this message one time and the pastor was talking about how to turn down the noise. And he was asked that question. It was a Q&A. He's like, how do you turn down the noise? Because life can be so loud, like anxiety, fear, pressure, everything can feel so loud and consuming. And he was like, well, it's actually really hard to turn it down. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem. He goes, but the answer is you turn up the truth in your life. Mm-hmm. And I have not forgotten that because it was just like, you know what? I can't stop the world around me. I can't, I want to sometimes, but I can't stop it. But I do have the power and the control to turn up truth. And when you turn up the truth, you can't hear a lot of the lies.
Oh, it's so funny that you phrase it that way. I remember when this specific incident happened, it was kind of a nasty comment about my appearance. And every time I looked in the mirror for weeks, immediately back in my head. And I remember one day I heard, you were the one choosing to put this record on repeat. I was like, I'm sorry, what? And God said, I have given you a whole library full of beautiful truths about who you are, and this is the one you keep playing? Stop it. Stop it. Yeah. So, that was kind of, it's an interesting phrasing, turn up the truth, because that's exactly what he was telling me to do. Like, take this one off, put one of my records on.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's so good.
I think that's our new slogan. Turn up the truth.
There you go. Yeah.
Turn up the truth.
I think that's your next
and
book,
find
Laney.
people who will remind you of the truth.
Turn up the truth.
And I think too, surrounding yourself with friends.
Yeah.
I had in that season, I had a really, really good friend come into my life who was like an echoing voice of God's voice in my head. And so there would be times where I would, hear something like you're saying. I'd feel like he spoke something to me and I might kind of forget and, just continue on, and she'd be the one to come and be like, no, Lane, like, you're not staying there. Let me remind you what's true. Come on, let's go. Let's get out of this hole. Let's get out of this pit. And specifically, there was one time we were on tour together. She was a speaker on the tour, and I was dancing on the road, and we were on the back of the bus. I had just broke up with a guy I was dating and was just kind of really just starting over a new season in life. And I was still just I was working through it. It was a process of like letting go of the past and stepping into newness of life. And she came and she was like, Lane, it's time to take the blanket off. And when she said that, she kind of motioned like she was like taking a covering off of my head. And I don't know what happened, but something happened in that moment for me where it just felt like I had just been carrying so much shame over decisions I had made, and times when I had like felt like maybe I just ignored God's peace in my life or his voice, and just almost just, it wasn't even maybe intentional that I knew of, but I was. And she was like, it's time to take it off. And I just felt this rush of peace and joy return into my heart. And I don't know exactly where I was going with that, but that was a very, very transformative moment in my life of just taking off the old and stepping into just that newness and that freedom that comes with listening to truth, turning up the truth,
The truth is there's a dog here.
I forgot to tell you about my sidekicks who have been quiet since 4 o'clock this morning. But
We're talking with Laney Rene, daughter becoming who you already are. It's interesting. This subject may sound, this is just for women, but I think men have a problem with this. It's your job, and that is your identity. And getting past that, especially I had a friend recently who used to be a co-host with me on the radio, and he left being on the radio to do something else, and he had an identity crisis through the whole thing because that's what he was for years, this guy on the radio, which is sort of an exciting thing in a way. Hey, you're famous or this or that, but talk to that. Can we get wrapped up in a vocation as our identity?
I did, for sure. That was backup dancing for me. It was like a dream job. I felt unqualified for it. So once I got it, it was almost like there was just this, I thought it was my security. And if you asked me who I was, I would tell you I was a backup dancer. Like that was my answer. And I found so much false security in what I was doing. And that's actually kind of why that season of my life lasted so long, because I was so scared of letting go. I was like, if I don't have this, who am I?
And what do you amount to? Because you're not a dancer anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. That what do I have to like show? And I did that for 4 years, and at the end of the 4 years, and really like the last year and a half, really just felt like God was saying, like, let go, like, just, it's time to let go. And obviously I stayed a year and a half longer at least, so I didn't let go fast. It was definitely hard, but letting go was the best decision I had ever made at that point. And I found myself in Nashville. I just moved there. And at the same time, I quit my dream job. I had just broken up with a guy I was dating for 4 years, and just had new, like, really ended, not intentionally, but just my friendships were changing. And I found myself in my apartment one day and just asked God the question, who am I? Like, without all these roles and titles, like you're saying, that I had found myself in. And I felt like God just reminded me of a video of me when I was a little girl. I had seen it just like a couple months earlier. And in the video, I'm 3 years old, and I just I grabbed this little karaoke mic and I just say, I love Jesus. And when I think back to that, it's really not about necessarily the words that were coming out of my mouth, but I just felt like God was showing me that, beyond anything I ever did, I was just his child. Like being his was enough. I didn't have to prove anything. I didn't, have to hide anything, but I was just his. And, like I said, didn't have a job, didn't have a lot of friends, didn't have my family there, didn't have a relationship. But man, that was the beginning of true confidence and security for me. And it definitely didn't come from a title. It came from actually having all that be stripped away, and finding, okay, I actually don't have anything good again on my own. I just have you. And there is it's the only confidence and true security I think we'll ever have, is just that being almost bare before him and going, okay, this is me and you love me, and that's more than enough.
Amen. That's good.
I love that I read in your book this quote. It said, whether it's for the first time or whether it's for the 100th time, it's never a bad idea to ask your Father, to ask Jesus to remind you of who you are. Thank you for that. That was beautiful to read. I needed to read that.
It's awesome. It's awesome. I've loved just getting to talk to people about this book, because it does feel like it's been echoed, that, and it's what God put on my heart for it, but that it really is something that we don't get tired of hearing. We don't outgrow, like my grandma read it, her friends are reading it, but it's just, yes, it's my grandma, but I've also had other people who are beyond me in seasons that go, we this is what we need to be reminded of. We need these reminders again and again and again, because no matter what season you're in, it's so easy to forget. It's easy to feel those waves of just confusion and just lose sight of who you are.
Good stuff. Daughter becoming who you already are, Laney Rene. Laney, we like to end our interviews with this question. What brings you joy?
That's a great question. My daughter brings me joy. She in this season is just I guess more of her personality is just coming out right now. And so she's a funny girl. She knows it. So she'll tell me, like, I'm funny, Mom. I'm like,
oh, that's cute.
That is adorable.
Yes. So she brings me so much joy.
Kids say the funniest stuff. I love kids. Oh my God. Make you crack up. Thank you so much for spending time with us. Really appreciate it.
Making us all cry.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks so much.
And appreciate your
you.
vulnerability too. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yours too. Thank you for sharing your story. Yeah, it was awesome. Thank you.
And
Love it.